Hey everyone, this is the Azure Functions live broadcast. I'm Chris Anderson, one of the PMs in the Azure Functions team.
I'm Donna Malieri. I'm another PM on the Azure Functions team.
We also have in the room with us a bunch of other people who will be going ahead and looking at your questions and things along those lines as you're asking. So feel free to start asking questions now on the YouTube chat or the Hangouts chat or wherever the questions are coming through, and also on the Twitter feed, and then we'll answer those throughout the broadcast.
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly put up just some slides we have here for what we're going to be talking about. I've got this slideshow. So what we're going to be talking about is we're going to have a Visual Studio tooling demo. We'll be talking about the App Insights GA plan, and we'll have plenty of time for Q&A, so make sure that you keep those questions coming. So just to talk real quickly about the Application Insights GA plan, one of the major things that we're working on doing right now is upgrading to the Application Insights SDK 2.4, which is currently in preview, released at build. There's lots of cool features like the ability to filter your live stream and things along those lines. And lots of really just kind of good stuff like that. The other major piece we plan on doing there.
Yeah, we're not seeing it now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold on.
This is
Tech support.
This is our first time doing
Present
this.
to everybody.
There we go.
Yeah, let's see if that one comes up. It's going to take us 10 seconds before we see it, so keep talking.
Okay.
I'll give you the thumbs up.
Alrighty. So quick change there, and hopefully this should be now seen by everybody after just a couple of seconds.
Yep, we see it.
Next, I'm going to go with paper slides.
Just hold it up in front of the camera.
No one can see my face I just made, which is good. Okay, so kind of starting over just a little bit, very quickly. So in order to get Application Insights to GA, we just have a couple of things on our list of things to do. We're going to upgrade Application Insights SDK 2.4, which you can go ahead and play with right now in your applications. It's out in preview. And that'll allow us to have a lot of cool new features with more automatic dependency tracking, filtering your live stream view, lots of really good improvements that have come out there. Even if you're not using Application Insights with Functions, if you're using Application Insights with anything else, I'd definitely recommend that you go and try the 2.4 SDK. We plan on getting automatic dependency tracking working with Functions, so all of your various bindings, so storage and service bus, event hubs, etc. We're hoping to actually automatically capture those in as dependencies inside of Application Insights. And that means things like the application map and things like that inside of Application Insights UI will actually light up automatically. And then kind of the last pieces in terms of more kind of quality related things end up being, we want to finalize the knobs and default values for outputting to Application Insights. We want to make sure that we're not blasting Application Insights with tons of data by default. We want to make sure that we're sending just kind of the right amount. And then you can go ahead and opt into sending more or sending less data after that. So that's something else that we're kind of doing some final tweaks on. And then lastly, making it easy to actually add App Insights to existing function apps. That's some UI that we'll be working on here very soon. One thing we'd like to go ahead and ask is for any of you guys watching and using Azure Functions today, we'd ask you to lend a hand and try using the Application Insights feature and give us some feedback whether our default knobs are actually the ones you'd like to see. That'll give us more confidence to actually go out quicker without having to do nearly the same amount of interviewing and quality checks. So with that in mind, I think the next thing that's on our list is going to be a demo on using the Visual Studio tooling. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Donna. I got to figure out how to switch the camera here as well. So
let's just first see if we have any questions.
And then stop. And then, yeah, we can go ahead and answer some questions here in between the sections.
All right, so a question from David O'Brien. Do we have any plans to deploy function apps and functions through ARM templates?
Right. Yeah, so there is actually an API for deploying functions through ARM today. You can actually go ahead and there is if you look on the Kudu pages, we can go ahead and tweet something out afterwards. There's a link where you can actually include your code inline in the ARM template, and it'll actually deploy that code inline to a function from there. The other thing that you can do is you can actually zip up your whole function app project and use the MS-deploy extension, path inside of ARM, and you can actually point at that zip package and use that to deploy via ARM. So it's actually a very common thing we've seen customers do is using the MS-deploy one basically they zip up their content, they put it on like blob storage or some other endpoint that they can go ahead and protect with an API key or something. And then they use that URL with the msdeploy thing. It downloads the contents, the zip, into the functions runtime, unzips them, and runs our normal kind of deployment stuff on top of that zip package.
I'll take one more question before the demo from Justin Yu. Do you have any plans to support nested folder structure so that we can group together similar functions?
That's interesting. So like basically having some kind of knowledge like where you have sub tiers of functions. So I'd have like function group 1 and then function A, B, C, and D on www root. We don't have any plans for that, honestly. It's one of those good opportunities to post that as a suggestion on the Azure Functions GitHub, which I'll have a link to at the end. It's aka.ms/func-github is the short link to that one. And it's a really cool idea. We've actually had some thoughts about how we could provide some more logical grouping of functions within a function app. We do have some good counterpoints. Like if you start having to think about grouping functions within a function app, you might be getting to the point where you want to think about just 2 different function apps. And if what the real problem is you don't like having to use 2 different function apps for user experience reasons, then maybe that's more feedback on us to improve the developer experience between 2 different function apps. So it's definitely an interesting idea. I definitely recommend sharing that on our GitHub so we can have more discussion on that. You want to go ahead and start the demo?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
So I'm just going to
share your screen.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So let's go to the Hangout and
Screen share. Cool.
share the screen.
And then you go ahead and click hers now, Chris. Oh, but you're centered. Yeah, so it's, there we go.
There we go. Our first time doing this.
Yeah.
Can you tell?
So what I'm going to demo is the coder card sample, which some of you have seen, but if you ask questions, I can change what parts of the demo I focus on. So I'm loading up the solution now. This is using our new Visual Studio tooling. So for those of you who haven't tried it out yet, I strongly recommend it. So it's using a preview version of Visual Studio, as you can see here. And the other thing that you need to do is you go to Extensions and Updates, and you'll install the Azure Functions tools. And the reason we did it like this is so that we can update the extension quickly. And some of you have wondered why we're depending on a preview version of Visual Studio. And that's because we're using a .NET standard project for a project type. And the tooling for that didn't come out until preview 3. And we hope to have a final version of that sometime in the summer. So let me just show you what this project looks like. Usually, when you look at a CS proj, something bad has happened, and it's just this big mess of goo that you don't want to look at. But with .NET Standard 2.0, the project type is tiny. In fact, if you look on Twitter, James Newton King talked about how he got rid of 2,000 lines from his CS proj. So the interesting thing is that all files are included by default, and you just have to say what you're excluding. The other thing that I personally really like is this is how you reference NuGet packages. Just one place in this file here. You don't have the separate packages config and then that stupid hint path thing. I don't know about you, but the hint path has caused me endless trouble because I would move my project around and then it couldn't find my NuGet packages. So NuGet was not as seamless as it needed to be. So the other cool thing about Visual Studio with this new project type, actually the new version of Visual Studio has this, you can see all your dependencies and you can see the dependencies of your dependencies, which I really like. So you can see, for instance, we're depending on Newtonsoft JSON. So let's look a little bit at what this project is doing. So we have our card generator. This is a new class library project. Let me just show you one of the dependencies that we have here. Let's go to manage the NuGet packages. This is the project that we have here. So you can see we have some web jobs packages. That's where we're going to use those attributes. And here we have this special tooling package called Microsoft Net SDK Functions. And you can see I actually have a later version. Let me go ahead and update that. We've improved a lot of error handling and things like that in this latest version. So what you can do, what this tooling package does is it takes these attributes that you've written in your code that are these web jobs attributes, if you're familiar with web jobs, and it turns it into function JSON. So that means that just by looking at the method definition, you can see exactly what the function is doing. So in this case, for instance, we have, let's start with the initial function. It is, we have a settings API, which is just an HTTP trigger. You can see here, we have it set to anonymous because it's just returning settings. And here we have what the web page does is whenever it has uploaded an image and it wants to request that image be processed, it sends an HTTP request. We didn't want to bother with having SPA create a queue message. So instead, we created a function that the SPA calls, and that creates the queue message. Notice here how I'm using this special return attribute. This is something a lot of people aren't familiar with. This is the syntax that you use in C# to say that you're putting an attribute on the return type of a method. So here we're just have one line of code, which is taking the input and writing it to the queue. And then what we're going to do is process that queue. We're going to call the Microsoft Cognitive Services emotion API and recognize the emotion. Based on the predominant emotion, we're going to generate a card. The other thing I want to point out here is notice these percent signs. These are values that are going to be pulled from app settings. So let's look at local settings JSON for a second here. You can see here that I have my input container is set to input local. When I'm running in Azure, I set it to a different value. The other thing I want you to notice here is notice how I have blob name in curlies. Card info message is a POCO type that I've defined, and it has blob name as a parameter. The cool thing is that I can bind to one of the fields that are in that blob trigger, that queue trigger, to bind to a blob. So basically, the queue trigger has in its payload the path to the blob and the name and title of person to put on the image. And just with the binding, I can just get that input data all set out for me, and I don't have to actually go to storage to read the data.
And you've actually created a POCO object right there to actually strongly type what the queue message is going to look like.
So I could use a JObject or dynamic, but you can also use the strongly typed object. So let's set a breakpoint here on after we've gotten the card image and the scores, and let's run this locally. The other thing that I'm going to do is go into my folder where I have the client, and I'm going to run that with npm. And all of this code is available on GitHub. I'll post a link to that in a moment, and you can try it out on your own. And I encourage you to try out with your own photo and post it on Twitter. And we'll, if it's crazy enough, we might even retweet it. So let's go to the client folder, and you see here where we have some node modules. I've already installed them, so I just do npm start, and that will launch a web page on localhost. That's a SPA. There's no server code there at all. The server is basically our function app. The other thing I need to do is change this to localhost so that the core's origins all match up. And then here in Visual Studio, I'm running the function. Let me just show you. Sorry, that's the wrong one. Build errors. Interesting. It could be that it was because I have to rebuild because I changed my version of that NuGet package that I was using for turning the attributes into function JSON. So let's clean this, and we'll start again. All right. So now we'll build. Oh, could not find assembly info. That's interesting.
You just delete it.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought it needed it.
It's not there at all.
Yeah. Interesting. I apologize. I have run this many times, but I apparently did not run it on this machine recently. Let's see.
Demo guys are fun. Do you want to take a question while
let's
go
do
ahead
that.
and debugs that particular one?
Yeah, we were talking about TypeScript in experimental before.
Yeah. So TypeScript is in experimental support right now. We actually have a awesome guy who's joined Microsoft recently in the cloud developer advocate role named John Papa, who has been rapidly helping us go through there and test it along with Fabio, who's the developer working on TypeScript. We hope to actually have some templates available here soon, maybe in the next week. But today you can actually just go ahead and create a JavaScript template, go in and change the file extension to TS underneath the covers via like the Kudu API, or if you upload via Git. And we'll actually go ahead and then start running that transpilation for you, and it'll, just work theoretically. There's been a few bumps that we've found here and there as far as the experience goes, and so we're kind of working at the pace where we think that it'll be open for everyone is when we'll kind of open it up. But we feel like we're really close, and that'll be really fun to use.
All right. A question from Jose about unit tests. Do you implement unit tests for Azure Functions, and does it make sense?
I mean, absolutely. If you're going to have any kind of code, especially if you're building a larger library within your functions, I think that makes sense. One pattern we see often is that folks will go ahead and write a normal kind of class library, which contains a lot of their business logic and things like that, so that way it can be reused across many functions. You can go ahead and write unit tests against that class library like you normally would. No reason not to. And then with functions, you can write unit tests for functions, though they often kind of feel more like integration tests. And so whether or not you would write a unit test for a function, or whether or not you just write an end-to-end unit test using like our function CLI to actually do an end-to-end test, I'm not sure whether or not there's like a line where doing unit testing and end-to-end testing is valuable. What you should definitely do end-to-end testing. So I might start with unit testing my code for anywhere that I have like class libraries and things along those lines, any public surface area. And then for the functions themselves, I focus on getting the end-to-end test working, and then move to using unit testing if I feel like that'll help me catch more errors.
All right, one more question. Can we set up CI as part of the ARM? It would really help to point the repository instead of adding the body in the ARM itself.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple of different ways that you can use ARM plus, some kind of CI mechanism like VSTS, and code hosted in a repository to deploy your functions. I actually kind of like the way that I've seen lately of someone basically they upload their code into VSTS, a Git repository hosted by VSTS. Then have VSTS kind of run a packaging step. In this case, they were running node functions, and so they also wanted to go ahead and run funcpack on them to make sure that their code was as nice and small and dense as possible. And then they ended up going through there and finally having a zip package, which they could then have VSTS actually push straight to the web app. And that way you didn't have to mess around with having to run an ARM command to necessarily do that for an existing app. But you can use VSTS's integration with like the VS ARM project to then use that to deploy like new stage resources. And so there is a really good integration there. A lot of stuff around VSTS that makes that stuff easier. We can also just kind of use the combination of all of those technologies with other platforms as well. So.
Cool. All right, so I have it set up. It looks like Visual Studio complains that there's a build error, but it actually built successfully.
Project, please.
Oh, I have to project again. 1 second here. I think Chris has to do it. Oh, it's set up?
It looks fine, yeah.
All right, cool. So, so my breakpoint is set. I have my client. Sorry, I have way too many windows on this computer. And got Hangouts in the same browser session. Here we go. All right, so let's upload a photo. I have some photos here. If I pick a cat photo, it won't work because it will say that there's no face.
I see.
Because it recognizes human faces.
The cats can be happy.
That's true, but they're still not human.
That's true.
Maybe your cat's human. Mine is definitely a cat.
It likes to think it's human.
So let's put up upload a photo of Satya, and for the title, let's say our fearless leader. And we expect that this will be a neutral image. So notice that there's a bunch of stuff happening in the output. And yes, our breakpoint was hit. And let's look at our locals here. So if we look at the face data that came back from the Cognitive Services API, and we can see these are the different scores. And look, in fact, there is no fear, very little fear. There's 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, basically 0. No fear at all in Satya, and no anger. A little, maybe one out of 100 anger, but mainly he's neutral. So let's keep going. And what'll happen is, if we go back to the spa, it'll refresh, and we can see that we do in fact have a neutral photo chosen here. So We have a few other card images here. We have anger, happy, and surprised. So please try it out and see how well the cognitive services APIs work for you.
Try to collect them all.
Yes, exactly. The other thing that I want to point out is that once we're happy with this, we just right-click and publish. It works just the same way as App Service Publish. You just right-click here, publish, and you can create a new function app from here if you want, and have multiple publish profiles, basically all the same functionality that you're expecting from Visual Studio. And of course, now that this is a class library, you can have unit tests. Like I have another project here that has unit tests. It even works with live unit testing. Here I'm using a document DB binding. Some of you have pointed out that it's a little hard to use to know which attributes are available. And so I'm happy to announce that I wrote some documentation yesterday and it should be published within the next few hours if it's not up already. So we will tweet out a link to that. And so that lists every single attribute that you can use, and it has some examples of how you might use it in your code. So we're really excited about this new direction we're taking the tooling. We want you to try it out and give us your feedback.
Cool, thanks, Donna. That was great.
Yeah.
Any other questions that we have for us?
There's one question about return attributes available for Node.js functions.
Sure. So in Node.js, JavaScript doesn't have the concept of annotations. So we won't be able to go ahead and provide annotations inside of JavaScript, but you can use return values from JavaScript inside of your JavaScript code in the same way that you can in C#. So if I wanted to go ahead and have the return value of my binding mapped to what I return from my JavaScript function, you can go ahead and use the $return as the name of your binding in the function.json. You'll also see a little checkbox when you're using our UI for return value for output bindings, and then that'll let you use the return value for that one.
Right. And if you look at our Node documentation, our JavaScript documentation, we have some examples of how you would use the return value. You do context.done, you pass null, and then the second argument is going to be the return value.
Yeah, and you can also go ahead and return a promise from inside of Node.js functions, and your resolve value, the value that you pass as part of the resolve, the first one, that'll be what's used as the actual return value. And of course, if you have an error, we'll go ahead and catch the error, and that'll just fail the function.
By the way, we've gotten a lot of feedback in the past that our documentation could use some work. And so over the past 6 months, we've been steadily improving it. If you want to give us more suggestions on specific things that you would like us to improve, please file a bug on the Azure Functions GitHub repo. Let me bring that up right now. In fact, you can see what things we're working on right now. So if you go here and you go look and you filter by me, you can see what I'm working on. In fact, I just finished this one, document C# assemblies. So I will go ahead and close this. Available. This is live fixing of bugs. So I recommend that you take a look at the issues that are here. We have everything marked with the documentation label that we're working on. And if you see that something's missing, just file a GitHub issue. And we triage these once a week, and we've been making a lot of improvements. And plus, our entire project is open source. This is our meta repo. If you can, or is it showing my screen here? So this is basically, you can see there's no code here. Just an issue template. All the code is in these other repos. So, so for instance, our runtime, our CLI, our portal, our templates, all of these are open source. And we have a lot of people contributing. Not only are we open source, we're doing development in the open. So we have our own, we do pull requests. The team itself does pull requests to add new functionality. So for instance, John Papa contributed a bunch of Angular improvements to the Azure Functions portal, which is written in Angular. And he's far more of an expert than we are.
And could you actually, now that I think about it, go show the releases tab on the UX. This is something that we've been doing lately as well.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And this is also really great. People have awesome time been like, you guys are great, you're moving fast, but sometimes you move so quickly, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
This is why releases are great. You can see here that there's actually a new release that's now in staging right now for us. Created 2 days ago, and this has a bunch of different features and improvements inside of it.
And some hot fixes. We had an issue with the IoT Hub where we only showed you the Event Hub. We had a new Event Hub picker, And we didn't realize that adding the manual field for Event Hub was useful if you wanted an IoT hub.
And
so now we're gonna have a first-class IoT hub.
yeah, that was the funny thing is we kind of had that feature on our backlog list
Right.
of things to go do, and then we broke IoT Hub. We're like,
Right.
okay, we'll just do it properly now.
Yeah.
And we fixed it in a day.
Exactly. So this should go out.
It's out now.
Is it out now?
Yeah, I think
Oh,
we actually
awesome.
released this now.
Oh,
So
perfect.
I was lying. It's actually out right now. But you can kind of see, we've got a lot of stuff in those
And these
places.
these release notes are super detailed, especially with the portal, because we have a lot of little bugs, like make delete more discoverable, or gracefully handle missing storage account. Live event. Oh, let me show you this one. I want to say live event stream. This is actually not the right one that I'm thinking of, but a lot of folks have noticed that the streaming logs were a little bit unreliable. We totally refactored the way that works so that we reconnect to the live stream, the log stream. In the future, we're going to make this even better. The way it works now, the portal just gets a bunch of data from the backend and it has to parse it itself. What we're going to do is expose a structured feed the portal can use, and then eventually even show you compilation errors and warnings right in line inside the Monaco editor.
Got mocks for that right now.
We do, we do. And most of our UI mocks, even our hi-fi mocks, are actually in GitHub issues. And once they're final for devs to work on, we've been pasting them in, so you can go and see exactly what's happening as we're designing things.
Exactly. All right, so let's take a few more questions here to round out the cast.
All right, question from Scott. What is the favorite topic for Donna? What is the first plan for first-class F# support for new VS tooling?
We're working on that right now, actually. So we've been working with Philip Carter on the F# team. What F# is working on Net Standard 2.0 project system support. And once they've done that, we will continue to partner with the F# team to create a new project template and the new item templates. We already have item templates for F# scripts, so we'll do the same thing we did for C#, where we have used templates within templates to have the same code base that can be used for either a script file or a class file. And I'm not sure of the timeline for that, but if you tweet the Visual F# team and tell them about your interest, they might be able to give you an update on when that'll happen.
All right, and probably our last question from Amit here before we wrap up. What is the recommended approach to use more advanced loggers when we need flexibility more than the TraceWriter offers?
Yeah, so we're kind of thinking through that right now. There was actually a conversation that Brett Samblet had on Twitter with someone who wanted to go ahead and have tighter integration with our current iLogger pipeline. So we're moving into using the iLogger pipeline. That's the new kind of standard way inside of .NET for doing iLogger for all of our backend systems. This means that we were able to easily plug in application insights. So that was kind of part of our application insights transition, was moving over to a modern telemetry stack and then plugging App Insights in at the very end of it. And our hope is that we can also plug in something like Serilog and other things inside of there. And we're thinking through right now, how possible would it be for people to basically bring in their own logger, essentially, and they can customize it however they'd like to. So they can, if they don't like our knobs, they can just bring in their own version of it. That'll work really great for .NET developers. Obviously, that doesn't work as well for JavaScript developers because that does plug into our backend code, so it has to be .NET. But we'll be thinking about different ways to make that kind of stuff even easier over time. So it's definitely on our roadmap to make the logging as extensible as possible.
And I lied. One more question before we wrap up.
One more.
Awesome.
Two more. Sorry.
Two
Lots of
more.
questions here. Good
Two
questions
more.
today.
Yeah.
From Per2. Any recommendations about using DI or IOC within functions?
Oh, that's a good question. So we actually got this question on our blog yesterday, and one of our devs, Fabio, is going to post a response, but he emailed me the response before he posted it, so I know the answer straight from the mouth of the dev. Originally, I had thought that this would be involved, this was related to doing .NET out of process, but actually we're exploring some ways of doing DI similar to what we exposed for web jobs. And we know that one of the common uses of this is, in fact, for logging and things like that. So we'll probably have a work item filed in the script repo. This is kind of a long-term project, so I don't really have an ETA for this, but it is something that's on our radar. We definitely get a lot of requests for this. So yeah, great question.
And I have created a new tag in the repo
Oh,
for dependency injection for us to
perfect.
track all these various
Perfect.
requests on
Yeah.
it, because we've gotten quite a few, and we're definitely looking into it now.
Absolutely.
And the real final question. Any updates to functions on-prem?
Yeah, I mean, nothing too big since build right now. Still going strong. We've gotten some interesting feedback on it so far. Our big plans are basically to continue to kind of iterate on what it is and get it into more places.
It being the Azure Functions runtime.
The Azure Functions runtime, yes. Right. And we also have, of course, Azure Stack, right. And it's planning on going out with the Azure Stack release. And so that's all on track right now as well. And so we really kind of have those two things. Azure Stack is going to be definitely our first, GA certified way of running functions on-prem. But the functions runtime, it's still definitely in preview right now, but we're working really hard on trying to make sure that we've covered all the scenarios we need to figure out when we could GA them.
Yep. All right. Awesome. So this has been a fun broadcast. Thank you very much for being here with us.
And our next broadcast will be on July 6th. That's a Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific again.
So that was July 6th Pacific at 11 a.m. Pacific. And definitely keep the questions coming. Ask us on Twitter, Stack Overflow, and User Voice. And next time we'll probably know how to use YouTube Hangouts a little bit better. So we're looking forward to that.
Getting better. Yeah, and so just to kind of also call out, make sure that you do talk to us. So we've got the akms/func.github. You can talk to us at Azure Functions on Twitter. And we also have an internal competition to see who can answer those Stack Overflow stuff all the time. So make sure that you use the Azure Functions tag on Stack Overflow when you have questions. Our devs appreciate the fake internet points.
Absolutely. They compete with each other. And don't worry about asking stupid questions or easy questions. They love those.
They love those, yes.
Because they can get their points up higher.
The more easy questions, the better.
Exactly.
Really. Thanks, everyone. Hope you enjoyed yourselves.